This all started with a gift from a neighbor. I had never made passata before, but when our neighbor moved away and gave me this chinois, I took it as a sign. So I bought 25 pounds of ripe tomatoes and tried making Italian passata from scratch. It was beautiful, messy, and a lot more work than I expected. Would I do it again? I'll tell you at the end. First, I washed the tomatoes and cored them and cut them into quarters. Then I added them to a large pot and cooked them over low to medium heat for about 30 minutes, just until they softened and released their juices. Once the tomatoes were soft, I transferred them into the chinois in batches. Then I used a wooden pestle to press the tomatoes through the strainer, leaving the skins and seeds behind. This part takes some patience. You press, scrape, stir, and press again. The goal is to extract as much tomato puree as possible while keeping the texture smooth. To speed things up, you can also pause the cooked tomatoes briefly in the food processor first. Then strain the puree to remove the skins and seeds. After all the tomatoes were strained, I poured the passata into a clean pot and brought it back to a gentle simmer. Then came the long reduction. I simmered it for about 2.5 hours, stirring occasionally until the sauce had cooked down by about half, and lightly coated the back of a spoon. At this point, the passata became richer, smoother, and more concentrated. For canning, I prepared clean mason jars and a boiling water canner. Into each jar, I added half teaspoon of salt and a sprig of fresh basil. Then I ladle in the hot passata through a wide mouth funnel, wiped the rims clean, added the lids, and screwed on the bands until finger tight. The jars went into boiling water canner and were processed according to safe canning times for my altitude. After the water bath, I carefully lifted the jars out and let them cool undisturbed on the counter. And yes, this is a fun part. You may hear the little pop as the lids seal. This part was done off camera. From 25 pounds of tomatoes, I ended up with about 3 full quart jars of passata plus 1 partial jar that I used right away for spaghetti. For the quick spaghetti sauce, I added the passata to a saucepan with 2 lightly crushed garlic cloves, a large sprig of fresh basil, and extra virgin olive oil. I let that simmer gently while the spaghetti cooked in salted water. I cooked the pasta 1 minute less than the packaged instructions. Drain it well, then toss it with warm tomato sauce. A little freshly grated parm or pecorino romano on top, a few basil leaves, and dinner was ready. This was such a simple bowl of spaghetti, but the flavor was fresh, clean, and bright. There's something very satisfying about tasting a sauce that started as a mountain of fresh tomatoes on your kitchen counter. So, would I make passata from scratch again? Honestly, probably not. I am so glad I tried it, especially the chinois was a gift from a neighbor, and I wanted to put it to use. But after processing 25 pounds of tomato, cooking, pressing, straining, reducing, and canning, I think next time I'd rather can whole tomatoes. They feel more flexible, less fussy, and they make better use of the meaty part of the tomato. Welcome to Lay's Kitchen, where flavors are without borders.